I'm not sure we'd ever gone to the moon if it hadn't been for the Soviets. We owe them a debt of gratitude.
In Washington, what he considers urgent national needs brings President Kennedy to Congress to deliver before an extraordinary joint session an outline of the challenges facing the nation, an exposition of the threatening perils he believes demand of the people new measures of hardship and sacrifice.
These are extraordinary times, and we face an extraordinary challenge.
In the late spring of 1961, John Kennedy's 4-month-old administration was in trouble. He had been meeting with key aides to decide on a new project that would inspire the country and help put previous failures to rest. On May 25th, before a joint session of Congress, the president revealed his ambitious new plans.
First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
Well, to be honest with you, I think that was one of the more courageous pronouncements of any American president.
All of a sudden, a new man, a young, brash, articulate president of the United States had entered into this fray and had raised the stakes enormously. I believe that the Soviets were expecting us to try to match them event for event for event, and all of a sudden President Kennedy came in and set our goals really up here, not down here. Half of your mind said, Kennedy doesn't know what he's talking about. The other half of the mind said, God, what a dreamer, it's beautiful, let's go for it.
It was too far out of step for me because I had yet to put man into orbit. And that still was a very formidable task for us to accomplish. And suddenly somebody said, you're going to go land men on the moon. I couldn't do orbit determination with radar from Cape Canaveral, much less find out where a spacecraft was 240,000 miles away at the moon. And that seemed like almost an insurmountable task.
I was a part of the team that did the estimates for how much it was going to cost, and our estimate at that time was $10 billion. And we'd done some pretty careful calculating, and they took that estimate up to Jim Webb, who was the administrator at that time, and he said, yeah, 20. And that's what he gave to Congress, and they allocated 20 and it cost 22, something like that. But because government programs always cost a lot more than you plan, because you can't control the bureaucracy. You just can't control the bureaucracy.
Orbiting the Earth presented very different challenges than the suborbital lobs Kraft's team had performed until now. Keeping track of the nearly straight up and down redstone shots was a lot like the aircraft testing that Kraft was used to. But a vehicle in orbit in an age without communication satellites would pass over huge swaths of the planet where tracking and communications would be non-existent.
And therein lay the management problem, the planning problem of carrying out such a far-flung operation, relatively speaking.
To deal with such a volatile enterprise, Kraft had to develop something that had never existed before. An equally complex and rapidly evolving system that could respond to any emergency at a moment's notice. He called it Mission Control.
What we did was put together the guys that understood the spacecraft systems, the guys that understood the trajectory, understood the communication systems, and began to think about how we were going to conduct such an operation. I was sort of an orchestra leader. And what I did then was say, I got to have these guys because they're the experts. And eventually they became the flight controllers. We had to send people out to all of these remote stations around the Earth. And we brought in young people, and that's the kind of guys you wanted. You wanted the young, the people that were willing to go out there and work hard, take the risks that were necessary to get the job done. And you got to remember, when you tried to get communications from Africa in 1960, the best you could hope for was 20 words of teletype. And that really limited the capability of what you could do as you flew around the Earth.
We just used whatever we could get hold of to talk to people. Shortwave, UHF, we were using all over the place. You had to do that in order to get the coverage you wanted, and it didn't always work.
The astronauts also became members of Kraft's mission control team when it was decided that they should be the only ones to communicate directly to the spacecraft, relaying orders and information from the flight director to the crew. The job was called Capsule Communications, or Capcom. By late 1961, mission control was ready. Even the questionable Atlas missile seemed trustworthy. But as launch day approached, NASA opted to be safe rather than sorry. John Glenn would become the second American to orbit. The first would be a young chimpanzee named Enos.